They thought they could break me. They thought I was just a monster, a creature of the dark, born to be sacrificed for their precious golden kingdom. But they forgot one thing. I have died once already. And in this life, the ocean remembers every single drop of blood they spilled. Welcome to the rebirth of the Blood Siren. The agonizing sound of tearing flesh echoed through the crystal halls of the Golden Dragon Palace. It was my flesh. A searing, blinding pain ripped through my chest as a hand plunged toward my sternum, fingers hooked like talons, aiming for the iridescent crimson scale that protected my heart. Just hold still, Lyra. Stop being so incredibly selfish, a voice roared. My eyes snapped open, gasping as cold seawater and the metallic tang of my own blood filled my lungs. Above me stood Aurelius, the Golden Dragon Prince, my fiancé of 300 years. His handsome face, framed by radiant blonde hair and golden horns, was twisted in a snarl of righteous indignation. His hand was inches from my heart, glowing with searing golden chi. Beside him, clutching a silk handkerchief stained with perfectly round drops of blood, stood Lyra, the white swan fairy, the darling of the heavenly realms. She leaned weakly against Aurelius's broad shoulder, her pristine white wings drooping in a picture of fragile tragedy. Aurelius, please. Lyra coughed, a delicate, breathy sound. Don't hurt Princess Lyra. If my illness cannot be cured without her heart scale, then let me fade away. I would rather die than see her suffer for my sake. Nonsense, Lyra. Aurelius commanded, his eyes softening with sickening devotion as he looked at her, before snapping back to me with absolute disgust. She is a blood siren. A cursed, venomous creature of the deep. Her kind regenerates. Losing one heart scale will barely inconvenience her, but it will save your life. It is the least she can do to prove she is worthy of marrying into the Golden Dragon clan. I stared at them, my vision blurring, but not from the pain. It was from the sheer, mind-bending shock. I am alive. I remembered this moment. I remembered it with the clarity of a nightmare etched into my soul. In my past life, I had lain on this very sacrificial altar, weeping, begging Aurelius to stop. I had loved him with the desperate, foolish devotion of a villainess who thought she could win a hero's heart through sacrifice. I had let him tear out my heart scale. And what had been my reward? My cultivation base had shattered. I was crippled, thrown into the abyssal trenches as trash, while Lyra used my primordial siren energy to ascend to goddesshood, standing by Aurelius's side as he conquered my fallen kingdom. I had died in the cold, dark depths, my body eaten by scavengers, my last memory the sound of their wedding bells echoing through the sea. But the heavens had opened their eyes. The wheel of reincarnation had spun backward, dropping me right back into the defining moment of my pathetic demise. Hold her down. Aurelius ordered the palace guards, his golden aura flaring. I will extract the scale myself. 2 heavily armored dragonkin guards lunged at me, their gauntlets reaching for my arms. In my past life, I had surrendered. In this life? I smiled. The blood leaking from my chest suddenly stopped. The crimson droplets suspended in the air, defying gravity. Aurelius, I whispered, my voice no longer trembling. It resonated with the deep, thrumming frequency of the ocean floor, a siren's true pitch. Did you forget what blood does in the presence of a siren? Before the prince could register the shift in my tone, the suspended droplets of my blood crystallized into razor-sharp crimson needles. Bang! With a flick of my wrist, the blood needles exploded outward. The 2 guards didn't even have time to scream as the hardened crimson projectiles pierced their armor, sending them flying backward across the great hall, crashing into the jade pillars with a bone-shattering crunch. Aurelius stumbled back, his golden eyes wide with shock, instinctively throwing himself in front of Lyra to shield her. I slowly sat up on the altar. The gaping wound on my chest knit itself together in seconds, sealing away the brilliant, pulsing light of my heart scale. I wiped a smear of blood from my chin, looking down at the perfect couple from my elevated position. You, Aurelius stammered, his golden chi flickering defensively. You dare attack my imperial guards? Have you lost your mind, Lyra? I tilted my head, my crimson hair spilling over my shoulders like a waterfall of fresh blood. Lost my mind? No, Your Highness. I think I have finally found it. Aurelius's face darkened with fury. His hand went to the hilt of his dragonbone sword. Yield, Lyra. Give Lyra the scale now, or I will not show mercy. The audacity of his words hung in the grand hall, thick and suffocating. I hopped down from the altar, my bare feet touching the cold crystal floor. With every step I took toward them, the ambient water pressure in the room multiplied. Mercy? I laughed. The sound was melodic, yet it carried an undertone that made the crystal chandeliers above us vibrate dangerously. You bring me to your palace under the guise of discussing our wedding, ambush me, strap me to an altar, and attempt to rip out my source of life to feed this overgrown poultry. And you speak of mercy? Lyra gasped, clutching her chest as if my words were physical blows. Sister Lyra, how can you speak so cruelly? I only ever wished for your happiness with the prince. Shut your mouth, Lyra, I snapped, the temperature in the room plummeting. Or I will pluck your feathers one by one and use them to scrub the algae off my palace walls. Enough. Aurelius roared. He drew his sword, the blade igniting with a blinding, divine golden fire. I will not let a filthy, cursed monster speak to an innocent fairy that way. Lyra, your jealousy has twisted you into a demon. Because of your vicious nature, I am making this official. He raised his chin, adopting the arrogant, supreme posture of a ruler. I, Aurelius, Crown Prince of the Golden Dragons, hereby annul my engagement to Lyra of the Blood Sirens. You are unworthy of my throne. Furthermore, I announce my intention to marry Lyra, who possesses the purity and grace befitting a true queen. He waited. He stood there with his chest puffed out, clearly expecting me to collapse into a sobbing mess. He expected the desperate, love-struck fool who had chased him for 3 centuries to beg for forgiveness, to offer her heart scale willingly just to win back a scrap of his affection. Instead, I raised my hands and began a slow, mocking clap. 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 Brilliant, I smiled, a genuine, terrifying curve of my lips. A masterclass in hypocrisy. The Golden Dragon Prince breaks a sacred blood oath to marry a low-tier swan sprite who fakes a cough every time she needs attention. You, Aurelius choked on his words, bewildered by my lack of tears. Since the engagement is broken, I interrupted, my voice slicing through his authority like a blade of ice. I will be taking back my dowry. The abyssal crown, the 3,000 pearls of the deep, and the territorial rights to the sunken eastern trench. I expect them packed and delivered to my borders by sunset. Aurelius's handsome face morphed into an ugly mask of panic and rage. The Golden Dragon clan was deeply in debt. The only reason they had proposed the marriage centuries ago was to access the boundless wealth of my abyssal kingdom. The dowry has already been integrated into the kingdom's treasury, he barked. You owe us that much for the shame you've brought upon my house today. And you are not leaving this room until Lyra is cured. He lunged. His speed was incredible, a flash of golden lightning tearing across the room. The tip of his sword aimed precisely for my collarbone, a debilitating strike meant to paralyze a siren without killing her. In my past life, I couldn't even see his movements. I believed he was a peerless genius of the martial path. But now, as my soul realigned with the ancient, dormant power I had neglected, Aurelius looked like a child swinging a heavy stick underwater. I didn't dodge. I didn't summon a weapon. As the blazing golden blade reached my throat, I simply raised 2 fingers and pinched the flat of the blade. Clang. The shockwave of the impact blew the heavy velvet curtains off the walls and shattered the windows, letting the deep-sea currents rush in. Aurelius froze, his eyes bulging as he stared at my pale, slender fingers holding his divine weapon effortlessly. Is this the mighty strength of the Golden Dragon? I whispered, leaning in so close he could smell the primordial salt on my breath. Pathetic. With a flick of my wrist, I channeled a burst of siren chi into the blade. The golden fire was instantly snuffed out by a torrent of abyssal black energy. The backlash traveled up the sword and slammed into Aurelius's chest. He was thrown backward, crashing onto the altar he had just strapped me to. He rolled off, violently coughing up a mouthful of glowing golden blood that stained the crystal floor. Aurelius! Lyra shrieked, dropping her fragile act as she scrambled to his side, her eyes wide with genuine terror as she looked back at me. The doors to the grand hall burst open. Dozens of imperial guards, court officials, and noble lords flooded in, drawn by the explosive shockwave. They skidded to a halt, taking in the chaotic scene. The altar was cracked. The invincible crown prince was on his knees, clutching his chest and coughing up golden blood. And standing in the center of the room, unscathed and radiating a terrifying, suffocating aura, was me. Treason, an elderly minister shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. The Blood Siren has gone mad. She has attacked the crown prince. Guards, apprehend the monster. I always knew she was a demon. Look at her hair, the color of fresh slaughter. The peanut gallery of nobles began their familiar chorus of condemnation. In my past life, their words had pierced me like arrows. I had internalized their disgust, believing that my crimson scales and dark magic made me inherently unworthy of the light of the golden dragons. Now, their voices sounded like the meaningless buzzing of plankton. Lyra saw her audience and immediately shifted into her role. She threw herself over Aurelius, her white wings spreading to shield him from me. She looked up at the nobles, tears streaming down her flawless, pale cheeks. "Please, my lords, do not blame Princess Lyra," Lyra cried, her voice trembling with manufactured heartbreak. "It is my fault. The prince only asked for her heart scale to cure my terminal spiritual rot, but the princess was unwilling. I understand. I am just a lowly fairy. My life is not worth her precious scale." But she didn't have to try and murder the prince for it. The crowd gasped in collective horror. A heart scale regenerates. She would deny the poor fairy life over a temporary pain. Vicious. Truly a creature of the abyss. To break an engagement and attempt murder in the same breath. She must be executed. Aurelius, bolstered by the outrage of his court, staggered to his feet. He wiped the blood from his mouth, his humiliation twisting into a murderous glare. "You hear them, Lyra?" Aurelius sneered, his golden chief flaring up once more, this time augmented by the formation arrays of the palace. The very walls began to glow with draconic runes. "The heavens themselves despise your cruelty. You will surrender the scale, and then you will be thrown into the dragon's keep to rot." I looked at Lyra, whose face was buried in Aurelius's chest. From the angle the nobles couldn't see, she peeked out at me, a vicious, triumphant smirk dancing on her lips. She thought she had won. She thought the pressure of the entire kingdom would force me to submit. I narrowed my eyes, my vision shifting into the primordial spectrum. To the naked eye, Lyra was a being of pure light. But through the eyes of a blood siren, I could see the truth. Beneath her glowing white aura was a festering, writhing mass of black-green energy. Spiritual rot? Yes. But it wasn't a natural illness. It was the backlash of practicing forbidden demonic arts. She needed my primordial siren scale not to cure a disease, but to mask the rotting stench of her own dark cultivation. It was too early to expose her completely. The court was blind, and they wouldn't believe a villainess without undeniable proof. The royal banquet next month, when the oceanic pearl would be present to react to dark magic, would be the perfect stage for her utter ruin. But I wasn't going to just stand here and take their abuse. "My cruelty?" I echoed, my voice suddenly dropping into a haunting, echoing lullaby. The nobles clamped their hands over their ears. The famous, dreaded Blood Siren song. It wasn't a melody of seduction, it was a dirge of destruction. "Let me show you true cruelty, Aurelius." I raised my foot and stomped on the crystal floor. Boom! The palace foundation groaned. The draconic runes on the walls flickered and shattered like cheap glass. The ambient seawater in the hall suddenly turned pitch black, tainted by my abyssal aura. The temperature plummeted below freezing. Ice crept up the legs of the guards and nobles, pinning them in place. What is this magic?" the elderly minister chattered, his breath turning to mist. "She's suppressing the dragon vein." Aurelius roared, transforming his right arm into a massive, golden dragon claw, and charged at me with the force of a falling meteor. The golden claw tore through the water, creating a vacuum that threatened to rip the flesh from my bones. It was Aurelius's ultimate technique, the heaven-sundering strike. He intended to cripple me right here, to rip the scale from my chest while I was paralyzed. I didn't move. I closed my eyes, reaching deep within my soul, past the limits of the Blood Siren bloodline, down into the absolute depths of my spirit. I was not just Lyra, the despised princess. In my past life's death, right before reincarnation, I had felt the awakening of something infinitely older. The spark of the Primordial Sea Goddess, the true master of all oceans. As Aurelius's claw descended, I opened my eyes. They had shifted from crimson to a bottomless, luminous abyssal black. "Kneel," I commanded. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I merely spoke a law of the ocean. The water in the room obeyed. A pressure equivalent to the absolute bottom of the Mariana Trench materialized directly above Aurelius's shoulders. The golden dragon claw halted mere inches from my face, trembling violently. Aurelius's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. The golden light of his aura was crushed instantly. Crack. Arg. Aurelius screamed, a sound that tore his throat raw. His knees slammed into the crystal floor with such force that the ground spider-webbed beneath him. He was pinned, completely unable to lift his head, forced about before me like a peasant before an emperor. Your Highness, the guards cried out, but they too were frozen by the abyssal pressure, unable to take a single step forward. Lyra screamed, dropping to the floor beside him, trying to pull him up, but she might as well have been trying to lift a mountain. I stepped forward, looking down at the crown prince who had once been the center of my universe. How small he looked now. How utterly insignificant. You spoke of our engagement, Aurelius, I said softly, crouching down so he could see the cold indifference in my eyes. A bond forged by blood and soul. You think you can sever it with mere words and a declaration to a cheating swan? You, witch. He wheezed, blood leaking from his nose as the pressure threatened to crush his organs. What have you done to me? I am formalizing our separation, I whispered. I reached out, but not for his flesh. I plunged my hand straight into the invisible, ethereal space between us. I grabbed hold of the glowing golden thread that connected my soul to the ancient dragon siren marriage pact. Normally, breaking this pact required a mutually agreed ritual, overseen by the high priests, to avoid spiritual backlash. I gripped the golden thread tightly in my fist. Lyra, no. Stop. Aurelius suddenly realized what I was doing. The arrogance in his eyes was replaced by absolute panic. If a bond is forcefully ripped by one party, the other suffers catastrophic damage to their cultivation base. You can't. It will destroy my golden core. A pity, I smiled coldly. With a violent jerk, I ripped the soul thread in half. The snap was completely silent, yet it echoed in the minds of everyone in the room. Aurelius threw his head back and unleashed a blood-curdling shriek. A shockwave of pure spiritual energy exploded from his body, turning his golden scales dull and gray. He collapsed onto the floor, convulsing, coughing up dark, coagulated blood, a sign of severe internal cultivation damage. I absorbed my half of the broken bond, feeling a sudden, immense lightness in my chest. 300 years of chained destiny gone. I was free. I stood up, stepping over the writhing body of the crown prince. Lyra was hyperventilating, staring at Aurelius's graying scales, realizing her invincible protector had just been brutally crippled in a single move. She looked up at me, pure venom flashing beneath her tearful mask. I turned my back on them, walking toward the shattered windows that led out into the open ocean. Princess Lyra, a dark, raspy voice shouted from the back of the hall. The high priest of the Golden Dragon stepped forward, a black iron net humming with suppression runes appearing in his hands. You have crippled the future king. You shall not leave this palace alive. Heaven's sealing net, bind the demon. He hurled. The net. It expanded in the water, glowing with a sickly green light, designed to instantly drain a siren of all their magic and bind their flesh. The net descended upon me like a falling sky. I could feel the suppression runes greedily reaching for my magical core, trying to sap the abyssal energy that was newly awakened in my veins. The nobles who were previously cowering now cheered, expecting to see the arrogant blood siren brought to her knees. Bind the monster. Bleed her dry, they chanted. I didn't even turn around. As the net touched my shoulders, I let out a sharp, clicking sound from the back of my throat, a sonar pulse used by apex predators of the deep. The water around me vibrated so violently it turned into superheated steam. The unbreakable heaven-sealing net, forged from divine iron, instantly rusted, decayed, and dissolved into fine ash before it could even fully drape over me. The high priest gasped, stumbling backward as his magical connection to the artifact was violently severed. He clutched his chest, spitting out a mouthful of blood. The cheering of the nobles died instantly, replaced by a suffocating, terrified silence. I slowly turned my head, looking over my shoulder at the pathetic assembly of the Golden Dragon Court. Aurelius was still twitching on the floor, Lyra weeping over him with a face pale with genuine dread. Listen to me carefully, dragons, I said, my voice projecting across the grand hall, chilling them to the bone. I am leaving. You can keep this broken prince, and you can keep his rotting little swan. They deserve each other. I locked eyes with Lyra, making sure she saw the promise of death in my gaze. Enjoy your stolen time, Lyra. We will see each other again at the royal banquet next month. I suggest you practice your crying. You're going to need it. Without waiting for a response, I stepped off the edge of the shattered window, letting gravity pull me down into the terrifying, pitch-black trenches of the deep ocean. The water rushed past me, washing away the stench of the Golden Dragon Palace. As I sank deeper and deeper, leaving the sunlight behind, the pressure grew, but it felt like a warm embrace. This was my domain. This was the abyss. But I was weak. My body was still limited to the strength of a blood siren, and awakening the goddess's spark had severely drained my stamina. If I was going to reclaim my kingdom, butcher Aurelius's armies, and expose Lyra at the banquet, I needed absolute power. I needed to dive into the Forbidden Trench, the place where the sirens had originally been banished from. As I descended into the absolute zero darkness of the abyssal floor, the water around me suddenly grew unnaturally still. The ambient sea life, the glowing jellyfish, the massive leviathans instantly fled in terror. The darkness thickened, feeling less like water and more like a physical, heavy presence. A tremor shook the ocean floor. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a heartbeat. Thump. Thump. Slowly, directly beneath me in the ink-black trench, two colossal, burning red eyes opened. They were the size of palaces, glowing with a catastrophic, ancient fury that made even the Golden Dragon Prince look like an insect. This was the forbidden legend. The true terror of the deep. The entity that even the heavenly realms feared to speak of, the Abyssal Dragon King. He was the primeval ancestor of the dragon race, imprisoned down here for millennia because his power threatened the gods themselves. I froze, floating in the water above him. In my past life, I had never dared to venture this deep. Was I about to be devoured by the ancestor of my enemy the moment I escaped? The water swirled, creating a massive vortex as the gigantic shadow shifted. Then a deep, ancient voice vibrated not in the water, but directly inside my mind. It was a voice filled with madness, possessiveness, and an agonizing yearning that spanned tens of thousands of years. You took your time coming home, my little queen. You took your time coming home, my little queen. The voice didn't just echo in my mind, it vibrated through my bones, marrow, and soul. It carried the weight of crushed galaxies and the suffocating pressure of the deepest oceanic trenches. The colossal, burning red eyes, each the size of a palace, slowly began to shrink. The water around me boiled, not from heat, but from the sheer friction of raw, unadulterated power condensing into a single point. I held my breath, the abyssal currents whipping my crimson hair around my face. In my past life, I would have curled into a ball and wept, convinced that my cursed existence as the blood siren was about to be snuffed out by a mindless monster. But the betrayal of the Golden Dragon Prince had burned away my fear. I had already died once. What did I have to lose? From the boiling vortex of black water, a figure emerged. He didn't swim. He merely walked up through the water as if the crushing depths were a grand staircase built solely for his descent. He was devastatingly tall, cloaked in robes woven from the absolute darkness of the abyss. Jet-black dragon horns, jagged and crowned with ethereal dark fire, swept back from his silver-white hair. His face was a masterpiece of cruel, angular perfection, but his eyes, those burning, catastrophic crimson eyes, were entirely locked onto me. This was the Abyssal Dragon King, the nightmare that kept the heavenly realms awake. He stopped inches from me. Up close, the terrifying aura radiating from him should have turned me to ash. Instead, it felt warm, familiar, like a protective blanket shielding me from the freezing trench. Slowly, a large, impossibly cold hand reached out. Long, clawed fingers gently brushed the cheek that the Golden Dragon Prince had struck just hours ago. "Who did this?" he murmured. The water around us instantly dropped 50 degrees, flash freezing the ambient currents into jagged shards of black ice. His voice dripped with a murderous intent so thick it made my chest ache. "Who dared to strike the Primordial Sea Goddess?" I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Goddess? You mistake me. I am Lyra, the despised blood siren, the monster of the coral reefs." The Dragon King let out a low, dark chuckle that sent shockwaves through the ocean floor. He leaned in, his lips brushing against my ear. "They blinded you, my queen. They sealed your divine veins, labeled your holy bloodline a curse, and convinced you that you were a monster just so they could siphon your luck," he whispered, his breath sending violent shivers down my spine. "But I could never forget the taste of your soul. I have waited in this suffocating dark for 10,000 years for you to return to me." He pulled back, his crimson eyes blazing with an obsession so profound it bordered on madness. I am Ravian. And from this moment on, whoever has caused you to shed a single tear will be drowned in an ocean of their own blood. Command me, Lyra. Let me be the sword that severs their arrogant heads. In my past life, I had begged for scraps of affection from a prince who looked at me like dirt. Now, the absolute apex predator of the universe was kneeling in the abyssal dirt, offering me his supreme devotion. A cruel, euphoric smile stretched across my face. I reached out, my fingers tracing the hard line of Ravian's jaw. Then rise, Ravian, I commanded, my voice dripping with newfound malice. Because my ex-fiancé's dogs have just followed me into the dark. And I am incredibly hungry. The sonar pings cut through the heavy silence of the abyss, like the shrieks of dying mechanical birds. I floated beside Ravian, cloaked in the shadows of the trench wall. Above us, piercing the gloom, were the blinding golden searchlights of the heavenly sea guards. They were swimming down in formation, clad in shimmering, impenetrable golden armor that proudly bore the crest of Aurelius, the Golden Dragon Prince. At their helm was General Thaler, an arrogant golden carp who had cultivated into a lesser dragon. In his hand, he gripped the soul-piercing hooks, a barbaric weapon designed specifically to subdue sirens. A phantom pain flared in my collarbones. In my previous life, Thaler had ambushed me with those very hooks. He had driven the rusted metal through my flesh, dragging me upward through the jagged coral reefs while I screamed. Also, he could deliver me to Aurelius like a butchered fish. He had laughed while my blood stained the waters, claiming it was an honor for a filthy siren to contribute to the white swan's health. Not in this life. Shall I tear them apart? Ravian asked softly, his arm wrapped possessively around my waist. The sheer restraint he was showing was palpable. The muscles beneath his abyssal robes were coiled tighter than a steel spring. No, I whispered, my eyes locking onto Thaler's smug face. This trash is mine. I pushed off from the trench wall, swimming directly upward into the blinding golden lights. There! Thaler roared, his voice amplified by water magic. The Blood Siren. Prince Aurelius has decreed she is to be taken alive. We need her scales intact for Lady Alara. Deploy the hooks. For guards shot forward, hurling the massive iron chains toward me. The jagged hooks spiraled through the water, aimed dead at my shoulders. I didn't try to dodge. I didn't try to flee. I simply closed my eyes and reached inward, past the humiliation, past the fear, and tapped into the dark, pulsating core of my siren blood. The very blood Ravian had just revealed was divine. I opened my mouth and sang. It wasn't a beautiful, enchanting melody. It was the blood aria. A frequency so low, so devastatingly primal, that it bypassed the water and vibrated directly inside the cardiovascular systems of my enemies. The 4 guards who had thrown the hooks instantly froze. Their eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated panic. Snap! The sound of their own veins rupturing echoed through the water. The golden armor they wore suddenly leaked brilliant red. Within a second, the 4 guards convulsed violently, their eyes rolling into the back of their heads as they sank like stones into the dark abyss. General Thaler gasped, reeling back. What sorcery is this? You cursed wretch, what demon arts are you using? Demon arts. I laughed, the sound cold and hollow. I raised my right hand, curling my fingers into a tight fist. The blood that had spilled from the dead guards didn't dissipate into the ocean. Instead, under my command, it coalesced, hardening into a massive, jagged crimson spear floating above my palm. Thaler, I said, my voice echoing with an overlapping, ethereal timbre that made the remaining guards tremble. In my past life, you tore my flesh. Let's see how you like the taste of your own medicine. I flicked my wrist. The crimson spear shot forward at the speed of lightning. Thaler raised his golden shield, screaming a defensive incantation. The blood spear shattered the golden shield like brittle glass, piercing directly through Thaler's right shoulder and pinning him brutally against a massive obsidian rock formation. He shrieked in agony, his own blood now feeding into the spell, turning the spear into a cage of crimson thorns that dug deeper every time he twitched. Monster! Thaler spat, coughing up blood. Prince Aurelius will mount your head on a pike. He is welcome to try, I sneered, drifting closer to his trembling form. But before I could deliver the final blow, the water above us exploded with a blinding, holy light. The temperature of the ocean skyrocketed, boiling the upper layers of the abyss. Lyra! A voice boomed, dripping with self-righteous fury. I command you to cease this madness at once. Descending from the boiling waters like a descended deity was Aurelius. The golden dragon prince wore his resplendent battle armor, completely untarnished. An illusionary five-clawed golden dragon swirled around his body, roaring silently and illuminating the dark abyss with an arrogant, burning radiance. He looked down at me, taking in the sight of his dead guards and the crucified General Thaler. His handsome face twisted in absolute disgust. I broke our engagement out of necessity, Lyra, but I never imagined you would sink to the level of a mass murderer, Aurelius preached, his voice filled with a sickeningly fake disappointment. Alara is in the palace right now, coughing up black blood because she lacks the divine medicine of your scales. And instead of performing your duty and repenting, you throw a jealous tantrum and slaughter my men. I stared at him, truly amazed at the sheer, boundless depths of his narcissism. My duty? I asked, my voice deadly calm. My duty is to be butchered so your little white swan can fake an illness and steal my spiritual roots? Silence. Aurelius barked. Alara is pure. She wouldn't fake anything. You are a vile, corrupted siren. Your scales are the only thing of value you possess. I was willing to show mercy and let you keep your life after we harvested you. But now? I will break your limbs, strip you of every scale on your body, and throw you to the trench scavengers. Aurelius thrust his hands forward. The illusionary golden dragon around him materialized, expanding into a massive, 100-foot-long beast of pure, scorching chi. It opened its jaws, rushing toward me with the force of a falling meteor. Submit to the golden dragon bloodline, he roared. In my previous life, the pressure of his golden dragon avatar had forced me to my knees. The sheer hierarchy of the ocean dictated that a mere siren must bow to a dragon. But as the golden beast charged at me, tearing up the ocean floor, I didn't even blink. I didn't need to. Before the golden dragon could reach within 20 feet of me, a single, pale hand wrapped in black robes materialized over my shoulder. Ravian simply snapped his fingers. Boom! The 100-foot golden dragon, the pride of Aurelius's cultivation, the symbol of the heavenly sea realm's dominance, shattered instantly. It didn't just break, it atomized, disintegrating into pathetic little sparks of light before winking out of existence entirely. The backlash of his avatar being destroyed hit Aurelius like a physical hammer. He vomited a mouthful of golden blood, reeling backward in midwater, his eyes bulging in sheer disbelief. What? Aurelius stammered, wiping the blood from his chin. He finally looked past me, noticing the tall, shadowy figure floating at my back. Ravian's abyssal robes flared in the water. He kept his aura completely suppressed, but even then, the absolute darkness surrounding him made Aurelius's golden armor look like a cheap child's toy. Who are you? Aurelius demanded, trying to mask his rising panic with arrogance. I am the crown prince of the heavenly sea. You dare interfere with royal justice? What kind of demonic beast has this siren taken as a bedwarmer? The moment the words bedwarmer left Aurelius's mouth, the ocean literally stopped moving. The water pressure didn't just increase, it collapsed. The silence that followed Aurelius's insult was the most terrifying sound I had ever experienced. The ambient light from the surface vanished. The glowing coral died out. The only light left in the entire abyss were the twin, catastrophic crimson suns of Ravian's eyes. Ravian stepped out from behind me. He didn't yell. He didn't summon a flashy avatar. He merely released a fraction, a single, minuscule drop of his true ancestral dragon aura. Crack. Aurelius didn't even have time to scream. The supreme dragon pressure hit him like a mountain range falling from the sky. The crown prince's impenetrable golden armor violently shattered into 1,000 pieces. The bones in his legs snapped with a sickening crunch, forcing his knees to smash into the obsidian floor of the trench with such force that a massive crater spider-webbed out beneath him. Arg! Aurelius howled, his face pressed flat against the jagged rocks, entirely unable to lift his head. The water around him was heavy as lead, pinning him like an insect under a boot. A bedwarmer? Ravian's voice was a soft, melodic purr that vibrated with genocidal promise. He glided forward, coming to a stop just inches from Aurelius's crushed form. A worm with diluted, muddy blood dares to speak to the ancestor of his race with such insolence? Through the agonizing pain, Aurelius managed to turn one bloodshot eye upward, catching a glimpse of the jagged, obsidian horns and the ancient, primordial dragon scales lining Ravian's neck. Aurelius's pupils shrank to the size of pinpricks. The ancestral memories imprinted in his very DNA suddenly flared to life, screaming at him in absolute, unadulterated terror. And no. Aurelius choked out, blood spilling from his lips. It can't be. The abyssal. You were sealed. You're a myth. I was waiting, Ravian corrected, his voice devoid of any mercy. And now I am awake. Ravian raised a single foot, casually resting his boot on the back of Aurelius's golden-haired head. He didn't crush it yet. Instead, he looked over his shoulder at me, his crimson eyes softening instantly from that of a merciless god to a devoted servant. My queen, Ravian said, his voice echoing for all the remaining guards to hear. Shall I squash this insect, or do you have further use for his pathetic life? Aurelius sobbed. The great, arrogant golden prince was literally sobbing into the dirt, weeping as the realization hit him. The cursed siren he had discarded was being called queen by the most terrifying entity in the history of the universe. I swam forward slowly, enjoying the look of utter despair on my ex-fiancé's face. I knelt down, grabbing Aurelius by his broken jaw and forcing him to look at me. Look at you, I whispered, my voice dripping with venom. Where is your royal decree now, Aurelius? Where is your disgust? Lyra, please. He whimpered, his previous arrogance entirely gone, replaced by the pathetic mewling of a coward. I was deceived. Lyra tricked me. Please, tell him to spare me. Pathetic, I sneered. I slapped him across the face, a sharp, ringing strike that echoed in the deep. I let his head fall back into the dirt. Killing you here in the dark is too good for you. You care about your face, your reputation, and your precious white swan more than anything. I stood up, brushing my hands off as if I had touched garbage. Let him live, Ravian, I commanded. I want him to witness exactly what I am going to do to his precious kingdom. Ravian smiled, a terrifying, blood-chilling curve of his lips. He lifted his boot, but not before delivering a casual, devastating kick to Aurelius's chest. Aurelius's ribs shattered, and his body was launched backward, shooting up toward the surface like a discarded piece of trash. Crawl back to your palace, little worm, Ravian's voice chased him up into the light. And tell them the true goddess of the sea is coming to reclaim her throne. The silence returned to the abyss, save for the faint groans of the dying General Thaler, still pinned to the rock. I ignored him. Ravian turned to me, the murderous aura dissipating instantly. He reached out, taking my hand and gently kissing my wrist right over my pulse. The contrast between his absolute brutality toward others and his terrifying tenderness toward me sent a shiver of thrill down my spine. You are so beautiful when you are cruel, Lyra, he murmured, his crimson eyes locked onto mine with a burning intensity. But why let him go? I could have ripped his spine out and fashioned it into a hairpin for you. I chuckled, leaning into his touch. Because tonight is the royal banquet. Tonight is the night Lyra is supposed to be cured, using the oceanic pearl. Ravian's eyes narrowed slightly at the mention of the artifact. The oceanic pearl. The physical manifestation of your divine essence. The item they stole from your cradle when you were an infant, replacing your destiny with a curse. Exactly, I said, my eyes turning cold. In my past life, I had watched from a filthy cage as Lyra absorbed my pearl, ascending to godhood while I rotted away into sea foam. They stole my life. They stole my power. Tonight, they intend to celebrate it in front of the entire heavenly sea realm. If Aurelius dies here, they will just hide. I want them at their most arrogant. I want to crush them at the peak of their joy. Then we shall attend the banquet, Ravian said. He waved his hand. The black waters of the abyss swirled violently around us. The dark currents wove themselves like silk, latching onto my torn, bloody siren rags and transforming them. In seconds, I was adorned in a gown woven from the night sky itself. Starlight glimmered in the folds of the abyssal silk. A crown of dark, ethereal coral manifested upon my crimson hair, and a necklace of pure, condensed oceanic pressure settled over my collarbones, instantly healing the phantom scars of my past life. I looked down at my hands. Power, raw, ancient, divine power, surged through my veins. I was no longer the Blood Siren. I was Lyra, the Primordial Goddess, and I had the apex predator of the cosmos acting as my vanguard. Shall we, my king? I asked, offering him my arm. Ravian's smile widened, showing a hint of jagged, dragon teeth. Lead the way, my queen. Let us drown their palace in despair. The Heavenly Sea Palace, the upper realm. The royal banquet was a sickening display of opulence. 10,000 guests, kings, fairies, and dragon lords laughed and drank glowing nectar, celebrating the impending recovery of Lady Lyra. I stood before the colossal, 10,000-ton gates of the heavenly palace. 2 elite guards crossed their halberds in front of me, sneering at my approach. "Halt! Beggars and bottom-feeders are not allowed." Before the guard could finish his sentence, Ravian didn't even lift a finger. He simply blinked. The 2 guards instantly exploded into a mist of blood. I smiled, raising my foot. I kicked the 10,000-ton golden gates of the palace. Boom! The massive doors ripped off their hinges, flying into the grand hall and crushing a dozen noble tables in a shower of gold, marble, and screaming guests. The music stopped. 10,000 heads snapped toward the entrance in absolute shock. I walked through the settling dust, Ravian's towering, terrifying silhouette right behind me. "I heard there was a cure being distributed tonight," I announced, my voice amplified by abyssal magic to rattle the very foundations of the palace. I locked eyes with the pale, trembling white swan sitting at the high table. Did someone order a monster? The entire grand hall descended into a suffocating, deathly silence. The 10,000-ton golden gates, relics that had stood for 10 millennia, supposedly forged from the unbreakable scales of the first heavenly dragons, now lay in twisted, smoking ruins across the immaculate white marble floor. Gold dust drifted through the air like glittering snow, coating the shocked, paralyzed faces of the upper realm's elite. I stood at the threshold, the abyssal winds whipping my crimson hair around my face. Behind me, Ravian was a towering pillar of absolute, suffocating darkness. He didn't even need to release his aura. The mere shadow he cast seemed to devour the magical luminescence of the chandeliers. "Guards," someone finally shrieked. It was a high-pitched, reedy sound that broke the spell. Instantly, 500 heavily armored heavenly sea knights materialized from the shadows, their glowing tridents leveled at my chest. But none of them dared to step forward. Their hands shook. They could smell the mist of blood from their comrades lingering in the doorway. At the highest table, carved from a single piece of flawless jade, stood Aurelius, my former fiancé, the Golden Dragon Prince. He was dressed in ceremonial robes of blinding white and gold, a stark contrast to the abyssal silk I wore. His handsome face was contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Beside him, clinging to his arm like a fragile, dying flower, was Lyra, the white swan. She was draped in a silver shawl, her face dusted with an artificial pallor to make her look agonizingly weak. Lyra, Aurelius spat, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He slammed his fist onto the jade table, cracking it down the middle. "You vile, degenerate creature! How dare you show your face here? You defile this sacred hall with your filthy, cursed blood. Have you no shame?" I tilted my head, letting out a soft, mocking laugh that echoed through the cavernous room. "Shame?" I repeated, stepping over a piece of shattered gold. I didn't even glance at the 500 tridents pointed at me. "I'm not the one throwing a grand banquet while the lower oceans rot. I heard you were celebrating tonight. Celebrating the miraculous cure for the delicate Lady Lyra." I locked my gaze onto the white swan. Even from 100 paces away, I could see the malicious, triumphant gleam hidden beneath her teary, doe-eyed expression. "Oh, Aurelius," Lyra whimpered, her voice a pathetic, breathy whisper designed to elicit maximum pity. She buried her face in his chest. "Why is she here? Has she not hurt me enough? Has she come to curse me again?" My chest, it hurt so much. Aurelius wrapped a protective arm around her, glaring at me with eyes that burned with golden fire. "You hear that, you monster? Your mere presence brings her pain. I told you that if you ever stepped foot in the heavenly palace again, I would personally sever your head from your body." Big words for a lizard who couldn't even keep his own promises, I sneered. The gasps from the 10,000 guests were audible. To call the Golden Dragon Prince a lizard was punishable by having one's soul refined in hellfire for a century. Aurelius's father, the Dragon Emperor, rose from his throne. He was a massive, imposing figure with a crown of branching coral. "Silence, you abyssal trash," the Emperor roared. "Seize her. Rip out her vocal cords." "Wait." Lyra suddenly pulled away from Aurelius, her eyes widening in feigned, absolute horror. She pointed a trembling, pale finger not at me, but at the grand altar in the center of the hall. The crowd's eyes followed her finger. The crystal pedestal, which had been glowing with divine light just moments before, was completely empty. The security wards were shattered, the protective runes sliced through with dark magic. The oceanic pearl. Alara screamed, dropping to her knees. It's gone. The sacred treasure meant to cure my affliction. It's been stolen. Pandemonium erupted. The oceanic pearl was the most sacred relic of the heavenly sea. It took 1,000,000 years to condense from the pure spiritual energy of the ocean's core. It was the only thing powerful enough to cleanse the incurable dark affliction Alara claimed to have contracted when she supposedly saved Aurelius's life years ago. Stolen. The Dragon Emperor's face turned purple. Seal the palace. No one leaves. Alara sobbed dramatically, her hands covering her face, though I could practically smell the smug satisfaction rolling off her in waves. Who could have done this? Who would be so cruel as to steal my only hope for survival? Then, as if rehearsed, one of Alara's handmaidens gasped and pointed a shaking finger at me. Look at the Blood Siren's cloak. All eyes snapped back to me. I looked down. Emanating from the pocket of my abyssal silk robes was a faint, unmistakable, pulsing white light. The divine resonance of the oceanic pearl. You! Aurelius roared, his voice cracking like thunder. He stepped down from the dais, his golden aura erupting around him in violent, blinding waves. You disgusting, jealous whore. It wasn't enough for you to possess the cursed blood of the abyss. It wasn't enough for you to refuse to donate your scales to save her. Now you break into her home and steal her only cure. The guests began to shout, their faces twisted in self-righteous disgust. Kill the Blood Siren. Burn her at the stake. Rip the pearl from her cold, dead hands. I didn't panic. I didn't scream or beg for them to believe my innocence. I just smiled. Did Alara really think her little trick with the teleportation rune was clever? I had felt the spatial fluctuation the moment I kicked down the doors. She had used a high-tier transfer array to plant the pearl in my pocket, hoping to frame me for the theft and justify my immediate execution. It was a brilliant plan, honestly. If I were the pathetic, love-struck fool I was in my past life, I would be on my knees right now, weeping, begging Aurelius to believe me, swearing on my soul that I was framed. But I wasn't that Lyra anymore. I casually reached into my pocket and pulled out the oceanic pearl. It was the size of a fist, radiating a pure, blinding white light that illuminated the entire hall. This old thing? I said carelessly, tossing the 1,000,000-year-old sacred relic into the air and catching it like a cheap toy. The Dragon Emperor looked like he was going to have a stroke. Careful, you wretched beast. Drop that and I will obliterate your entire bloodline. Give it back, Lyra, Aurelius commanded, drawing his golden broadsword. The blade hummed with lethal intent. Hand over the pearl. Then, you will kneel before Alara. You will rip out your own siren core and offer your scales to apologize for this terror. If you do that, I might be merciful enough to let you live as a slave in our lowest dungeons. I stopped tossing the pearl. I looked at Aurelius, really looked at him. The man I had once loved so deeply that I had bled myself dry to forge his armor. The man who had thrown me away the moment a purer woman fluttered her eyelashes at him. Aurelius, I said softly, my voice carrying over the silence. Do you really think she's sick? Aurelius frowned, his sword wavering for a fraction of a second. What nonsense are you spewing now? The dark affliction that she suffers from, I continued, pacing slowly. The one that makes her cough up blood whenever you try to hold me accountable. The one that requires rare, priceless treasures to soothe. Have you ever actually seen the affliction, Aurelius? Or do you just blindly believe the tears of a lying, rotting vulture? Shut up. Alara suddenly screamed, her delicate facade slipping for a microsecond. Her eyes started nervously to the pearl in my hand. Aurelius, don't listen to her. She's using abyssal mind magic. Get the pearl back. Please, my chest. I'm dying. Aurelius's eyes hardened. You have 3 seconds to hand it over, Lyra. 1. I looked down at the oceanic pearl. The ultimate purifying artifact. 2. Aurelius barked, raising his sword. You want the cure so badly? I whispered, my lips curling into a wicked, predatory grin. Then take it. I didn't throw it to him. I closed my fist. With a sickening, crystalline crunch, the unbreakable, sacred oceanic pearl shattered into 1,000 pieces within my grasp. For a moment, time stopped. The 10,000 guests froze in absolute, mind-shattering horror. Aurelius's jaw dropped, his sword arm going slack. Even the Dragon Emperor staggered backward, clutching his chest as if I had just ripped his own heart out. No, Aurelius howled. A sound of pure agony. I opened my hand. The crushed remnants of the pearl hovered in the air, glowing with an unstable, blinding intensity. Let's see what this cure actually does, I said coldly. With a flick of my wrist, I sent the pulverized, highly concentrated dust of the oceanic pearl exploding outward like a divine hurricane. The wave of pure, purifying light swept across the grand hall. When it washed over the guests, they felt a warm, refreshing breeze. But when the wave of purifying light slammed into Lyra, the reaction was catastrophic. The moment the dust touched her pure silver shawl and pale skin, a horrific, gut-wrenching sizzle echoed through the hall, like acid eating through meat. Lyra let out an unearthly, demonic shriek. Get it off me! Get it off! She thrashed wildly on the jade dais, clawing at her own skin. Before the terrified eyes of the entire Heavenly Sea Court, the illusion shattered. The purifying light of the pearl forcibly stripped away her disguise, reacting violently with the true nature of her soul. Her beautiful, pristine white swan feathers began to turn a sickly, oily black. Her skin sloughed off, revealing pulsating veins filled with putrid, neon-green demonic energy. A foul, suffocating stench of sulfur and rotting corpses flooded the opulent hall, making dozens of nobles vomit instantly. She wasn't suffering from a dark affliction. She was the dark affliction. What is this? Aurelius stumbled backward, his golden sword clattering to the ground. He stared at the monstrous, rotting creature shrieking on his throne. Lyra? What's happening to you? She's a parasitic demon, you blind fool, I said, my voice echoing like a death knell in the stunned silence. She's been faking her illness to harvest the cultivation of the heavenly treasures you feed her. Her pure aura was nothing but a cloak woven from the souls of the water spirits she devoured. The oceanic pearl didn't just fail to cure her, it burned away her disguise, because it recognizes her as a creature of absolute filth. The dragon emperor looked like he was going to faint. The elders of the court stared in muted, trembling horror. The purest fairy in the realm, the one they had ousted me for, was a demonic parasite. Lyra, now a twisted, blackened monstrosity, glared at me with 4 glowing, multifaceted eyes. You bitch, she hissed, her voice overlapping with 100 demonic echoes. I'll kill you. I'll eat your heart. She lunged at me, a blur of rotting black feathers and toxic claws. She didn't make it halfway. A massive, invisible force slammed into her from above, flattening her against the marble floor with such devastating pressure that her bones shattered into a fine powder. She couldn't even scream. She lay there, twitching, a puddle of black ooze. I didn't even look back at Ravian. I knew he wouldn't let a speck of her filth touch my boots. The hall was dead silent save for the sickening gurgles of the crushed demon swan. Aurelius fell to his knees. His golden eyes darted wildly between the rotting monster on the floor and me. His mind was breaking. The truth was too heavy, too humiliating for his arrogant ego to process. He had thrown away a kingdom, broken an ancient vow, and humiliated his true fiancé for a literal parasite. But a narcissist never accepts blame. You did this, Aurelius whispered, his voice trembling not with regret, but with psychotic denial. He slowly rose to his feet, his golden aura flaring violently, turning from pure gold to a tainted, blood-red hue of rage. You cursed her. You used your foul abyssal magic to corrupt my Lyra. You ruined everything. I sighed, shaking my head. Pathetic to the very end. I will tear you apart. Aurelius roared, fully giving into his draconic bloodline. His human form shattered, expanding into a massive, 50-foot-long golden dragon. His scales glittered with lethal energy, and his jaws opened to unleash a torrent of annihilating holy fire straight at me. Die, Lyra, his draconic voice boomed. The guests screamed and dove for cover. The heat of the fire was enough to melt the marble pillars. I didn't move. I didn't summon a shield. I didn't even blink. As the pillar of golden fire was about to engulf me, I simply raised one bare, pale hand. Smack. With a single, effortless backhand, I struck the column of fire. The impact created a sonic boom that shattered every stained glass window in the palace. The annihilating holy flame didn't just disperse, it reversed direction, blasting backward and slamming into Aurelius's open mouth. The golden dragon choked, his own fire exploding inside his throat. He crashed to the floor, violently thrashing and coughing up molten gold blood. Before he could recover, I flashed forward. The The speed of my movement shattered the sound barrier. In a fraction of a second, I was standing on top of his massive, draconic snout. Aurelius's giant golden eyes widened in primal terror as he looked up at me. "You wanted my scales, Aurelius?" I whispered, leaning down. "You wanted to rip out my core to save your little parasite?" I drove my hand straight into the center of his chest. My fingers pierced his legendary, impenetrable golden scales like they were wet paper. I dug deep into his flesh, bypassing muscle and bone, until my fingers wrapped around the pulsing, blazing source of his power. His dragon core. "No!" the Dragon Emperor screamed from the dais, finally shaking off his shock. "Stop. Have mercy. He is the Crown Prince." "Mercy," I replied coldly, looking the Emperor dead in the eye, "is a luxury for the pure. And this court is rotten to the core." I violently ripped my hand back. Aurelius let out a scream that tore the very fabric of the realm. Blood sprayed across the white marble like a macabre painting. In my hand, I held a glowing, golden orb the size of a melon. It beat frantically, trying to return to its master. Aurelius's massive dragon body shrank, rapidly degenerating back into his human form. He lay on the floor, naked, covered in blood, and gasping for air. His cultivation was gone. His divine bloodline was severed. I had just turned the most arrogant prodigy of the upper realm into a crippled, powerless mortal. My core. Aurelius whimpered, crawling weakly toward me, his hands shaking as he reached for the glowing orb. "Please. Lyra, please." I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No love. No hate. Just the cold, vast emptiness of the deep ocean. I tightened my grip and crushed his golden dragon core to dust. Aurelius collapsed, his eyes rolling to the back of his head, weeping tears of blood. "Treason." The roar shook the heavens. The Dragon Emperor, alongside the 12 high elders of the heavenly court, erupted with explosive, terrifying killing intent. 13 pillars of divine light shot into the sky, their combined pressure enough to turn a mountain into dust. "You have destroyed the future of the golden dragon race," the Emperor bellowed, his face contorted with grief and murderous rage. "I don't care what that swan was. You are a cursed blood siren, a freak of the abyss. I will personally grind your soul into the dirt. Elders, execute the array. Annihilate her." The 12 elders chanted in unison, summoning the supreme heavenly judgment array. A massive, spinning golden runic circle appeared above my head, crackling with the destructive power of a dying sun. They thought I was just a blood siren. They thought I was a mutation, a curse of the lower depths, an anomaly to be stamped out. It was time to remind them who owned the water they drink. A cursed blood siren? I laughed, the sound no longer human. It sounded like the crushing depths of the Mariana Trench, deep and vibrating with ancient resonance. I closed my eyes, reached deep within my soul, and shattered the seal I had placed on myself 3,000 years ago. Boom! The entire heavenly realm violently shuddered. The sky outside the palace, previously a bright, sunny blue, instantly turned pitch black. Then, the water came. It didn't flow, it erupted. Billions of tons of primordial, glowing blue seawater burst from thin air, flooding the grand hall. But it didn't drown anyone. It hovered, swirling around me like a loyal army, forming a colossal vortex of divine energy that shattered the elders' heavenly judgment array in less than a second. The elders screamed as the backlash of their broken array sent them hurtling across the room, crashing into pillars. I slowly rose into the air, suspended by the primordial currents. The ugly, despised crimson scales of the blood siren peeled away from my body. In their place, shimmering, iridescent scales of starlight and deep-sea sapphire bloomed across my skin. My crimson hair shifted into a flowing river of liquid moonlight. Above my head, the water condensed, freezing into an ancient, jagged crown of coral and abyssal ice. The divine pressure radiating from me forced every single person in the hall, including the Dragon Emperor, to their knees. The marble cracked under the weight of my aura. "Impossible," the Emperor gasped, his eyes bulging as he stared at my transformation, his royal knees bleeding against the floor. "That crown, that aura. You are not a mutant." "I am the mother of the tides," I declared, my voice echoing with the weight of 1,000,000,000 oceans. "I am the cradle of the deep. I am the Primordial Sea Goddess, the first sovereign of the waters. And you, little fish, have dared to spit in my domain." The realization hit the court like a physical blow. The ugly, cursed villainess they had mocked, spat on, and cast out was the literal deity of their entire element. They had thrown away a goddess for a rotting parasite. Aurelius, barely conscious on the floor, looked up at me. His broken mind finally grasped the magnitude of what he had lost. He let out a pathetic, guttural wail of ultimate despair, clawing at his own face until he bled. "Ancestor," the Dragon Emperor shrieked, terror completely overriding his pride. He slammed his head against the floor, praying to the heavens. "Supreme Ancestor, hear my plea. Awaken from your slumber. The heavenly palace is falling. Save your descendants from this wrath." A low, dark chuckle resonated from the back of the hall. It was a sound that made the blood in every dragon's veins instantly freeze. It carried the weight of absolute, cosmic death. From the shadows near the shattered doorway, the towering man who had accompanied me finally stepped into the light. As Ravian walked forward, he dropped the concealment charm that hid his true nature. Black, jagged horns tore through the air above his head. His eyes ignited like twin supernovas of dark matter. The very fabric of space warped and screamed around him, unable to handle his presence. He didn't just exude power. He exuded the end of the world. The Dragon Emperor looked up, his jaw slackening. Recognition dawned in his ancient eyes. "No, it cannot be," the Emperor whispered, trembling so violently he looked like he might vibrate apart. "The legends. The first king. The Abyssal Dragon King." Hope suddenly flashed in the Emperor's eyes. The supreme ancestor of all dragons had arrived. Surely, he had answered the prayer. Surely, he would strike down this arrogant sea goddess who had crippled his descendant. "Ancestor," the Emperor cried, tears of joy streaming down his face. "You have come. Please smite this woman. She has destroyed our prince. She has ruined your golden lineage." Ravian didn't even look at the Emperor. He walked right past the groveling, weeping dragons. He walked past the shattered remnants of Aurelius. He walked past the puddle of the demon swan. He stopped directly beneath me, where I hovered in my divine glory. And before the horrified, disbelieving eyes of the 10,000 guests, the supreme, terrifying abyssal dragon king, the god of death and destruction, the ancestor of the entire draconic race, slowly descended onto one knee. He bowed his head, taking my pale, glowing hand in his massive, clawed ones. He pressed his lips to my knuckles with a reverence that bordered on religious fanaticism. "My goddess," Ravian murmured, his voice a dark, velvety purr that sent shivers down my spine. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with a millennial, feral obsession that he no longer tried to hide. "My soulmate, you are as breathtaking in your divine wrath as you were in my dreams." The sound of the Dragon Emperor's heart literally stopping echoed in the silence. "Ancestor," the Emperor choked out, coughing up blood from the sheer shock. What are you doing?" She is our enemy." Ravian finally turned his head, looking down at his descendants with a gaze so cold it could freeze time. "You dare call yourselves my lineage?" Ravian's voice was a soft, deadly whisper. "For 10,000 years, I have searched the cosmos for her. For 10,000 years, I have guarded the abyss, waiting for the day my goddess would reclaim her throne. And when she finally walks among you, you mock her. You break her heart? You demand her scales for a piece of demonic trash." Ravian stood up, wrapping his arm around my waist, pulling my back flush against his solid chest. His dark aura violently lashed out, wrapping around the necks of the Emperor, the elders, and the broken body of Aurelius. "You should be thanking her," Ravian smiled, his jagged teeth glinting. "Because if she hadn't crippled the boy, I would have dragged his soul into the abyssal fire and tortured him until the stars burned out." The golden dragons wept, their faces pressed against the floor, realizing they were entirely, irrevocably doomed. They had not only offended their supreme god, but their own ancestor had sided against them. I looked down at the ruined banquet, at the groveling kings, the crippled prince, and the shattered palace. The anger that had burned inside me for 2 lifetimes finally extinguished, replaced by the cool, endless calm of the ocean. I turned my head, looking up into Ravian's dark, obsessive eyes. "Are you ready to go home, my king?" I asked. Ravian's smile softened into something entirely devoted. He pulled me closer, resting his forehead against mine. "Wherever you are, Lyra," he whispered, "is my only kingdom. Let the heavenly realm drown. We have an ocean to rule." As we turned our backs on the screaming, despairing ruins of the Golden Court, the primordial waters crashed down behind us, washing away the sins of the past and paving the way for the reign of the deep. As the golden dragons fall and the tides shift, we are left with a powerful truth. True power isn't given by titles or crowns, but by the strength you find when you stand alone. Lyra's journey teaches us that the people who discard us often do so because they are threatened by the magnitude of our light. In our own lives, when we face betrayal or loss, we don't need to beg for our worth. We need only to look inward, reclaim our truth, and walk away from tables that no longer serve us. Let the story remind you that your past does not define your destiny. Whether you are building a career, healing from a broken relationship, or fighting for your autonomy, remember, you are the sovereign of your own abyss. Keep moving forward, stay true to your value, and never, ever let someone else dictate your worth. Remember these 3 lessons. 1. Never sacrifice your core foundation for the approval of those who view your kindness as a weakness. 2. A failure is not an end. It is a catalyst to shed your old, limited self and awaken your true, latent potential. And lastly, do not let the peanut gallery of critics sway your vision. Focus on your own resources and inner authority to reclaim your seat at the table. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment on your favorite face-slapping moment or lesson, and join us for our next epic tale of destiny reclaimed. Until next time.